Hello everyone. I wanted to do a video that is a response to Shoe0nHead's male loneliness epidemic commentary, and in particular I wanted to respond to her follow-up video that she did on some of the feedback in the comments that she got on her original video. And there's a couple of main points that I want to make here. I know that Hammerhand and Thinking Ape and some others within the men's community, some other kind of top-level content creators have discussed. They've already done their videos on this, but there are a couple of points I wanted to make myself on this, so I'm going to make my own response. I'm going to play clips of Shoe0nHead talking about the men's community, and that's the part of her video that I'm going to focus on, right? I'm not focusing on the first 22 minutes or so of her commentary, but the last 5 or 6 where she addresses the men's community itself. So I'm going to respond to various points that she makes, and then I'm going to give sort of an overall discussion here at the end. And I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can, but I do want to get some key points in that I think are important to think about and consider in regard to her response. So let's get into the video here.
The internet feminists weren't the only ones booty blasted about my video. I also rustled the jimmies of some in the Manosphere.
Yeah, so that's not a particularly good start. Just the way that she says Manosphere shows a slight bit of derision or sarcasm. And I realize that Shoe0nHead's commentary is largely about entertainment, although she does try to convey things that she finds to be important by entertaining her fan base, basically. But that's not a good start, right? Oh, it's the Manosphere. Alright, we'll see where this goes.
You just want more OnlyFans subscribers. You don't care about male loneliness. She's actually a man dressed as a woman. That's why she or he is there speaking about men's issues. Fellas, protect your sanity, your seed, and your wallet in these current times. These women are shapeshifters. This chick is gonna hit the wall in 10 years. That's why she cares about male loneliness. She sees many cats in her future. They want us back on the plantation, gentlemen. Hold the line! I don't really understand what the conspiracy here in general is, though. Like I'm just talking about a subject I found important and interesting, like I've been doing on this channel. And these guys are like, stay strong, brothers! Don't give in to temptation!
Yeah, so the first important point, I think, to make about June's reaction here is that she doesn't seem to be aware of the history of the men's community. Or perhaps she's just disregarding it, but to give her the benefit of the doubt, it seems like she's either unaware of or doesn't really care about the history of the men's community from the time that it was primarily on forums like A Voice for Men and more or less not on YouTube nearly as much as it is now. And I wasn't around for a lot of that time period, right? I first kind of discovered the men's community around 2013, 2014. Started making comments on a lot of videos around then, and then started making content around 2017. So I wasn't around for that initial stage of sort of men trying to help other men, or essentially putting good information out there for men to discuss in relation to feminism, in relation to gynocentrism, and just where things stand in general between men and women today. But I do know from enough other people talking about it that what basically happened was that women infiltrated those communities and took them over. That women, to a large degree, policed those communities and forums and basically watered down the message as much as they could have. And even if June is not aware of this, I think that she has to be aware of the sort of treehouse analogy, or the sort of comparison that's made of boys get together and they build a treehouse for themselves. And then the girls want to come in, even though the girls didn't help build it at all, and they want to do their own thing in the treehouse. They want to be a part of the process. They want to basically have their way and set the rules in terms of what they do inside of that structure, in terms of putting their stuff in the structure and basically taking it over. And then what happens is the boys are driven out, because if they try to maintain possession of that, they're considered bullies, or they're considered bad or abusive to the girls. And then the girls run the treehouse literally into the ground. in the case of this analogy, literally into the ground. And then they want the boys to come fix it. And a lot of the time that's used to describe kind of where things are with the family situation between men and women. And the reason why I go into detail with that is to say that it's fairly simplistic, right? It's fairly straightforward. Men don't want women taking over the treehouse anymore. They don't want that to happen because the men's community on YouTube, on other social media outlets, that is something that men have found value in for quite some time now. And a lot of men don't want women to come in and do like they did with things like A Voice for Men, with things like other examples of men trying to form a community. And so they're very protective about women not taking over these kinds of things. Now, to be fair, I'm not too worried about that compared to a lot of other men within the men's community, not because I don't think that women could pull it off, but because I'm not so much about organizing, right? I'm not so much about men trying to help other men to change the system. And I'm going to get into that more in this video. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next clip. But that is the reason why a lot of guys look at this and say, you know what? We don't want women in this community. This is a place for men. And women have all these other forums, all these other sort of avenues to which they can use to let their voices be heard. We don't need this in our community. We don't need this in what we've established. And so that is why you see this hold the line sort of reaction. For myself, I don't really care that much because to me, as long as the message gets out there that feminism has basically wrecked the situation between men and women, that men have better options available to them, I don't really care who puts that message out there. The question is the message going to be watered down again? Is this going to be corrupted like it has been in the past by a lot of these women coming into the men's community and not taking over, so to speak, because you can't take over something like men going their own way. That's why I'm not worried about that aspect of it. Only men can be men going their own way. But to take over the message so that the information is not so easily available for men that start to figure out, wait a second, maybe marriage is a scam. Maybe this idea that the patriarchy abuses women and so women need me too, maybe that's a scam. Maybe this is just being used to have some sort of heavy-handed way to basically strike at men that women don't like. Maybe this whole modern day dating thing, hookup culture, and everything that goes along with still trying to date or have relationships within that culture, maybe that's a waste of time for me as a guy because women don't do anything in relationships anymore anyway, and sex is so easy to get. That's the thing, is if the message is going to be corrupted to where it's just this watered down feminism is bad type of thing instead, that could be a problem. But a lot of it is also just not wanting women to come over and take over the treehouse, so to speak. And again, because I lean more toward a MGTOW way of thinking these days, I don't feel as threatened by that. But I do see where that's still a problem, especially if the message gets corrupted. And that's why, from my understanding, a lot of men are having the reaction that they're having toward Shoe0nHead and other women being the prominent figures within the men's community.
Why are we listening to women about male loneliness? Plenty of male figures discussing this. Honestly, I'm gonna say it, SJW behavior, liberal behavior, woman behavior, to imply that I shouldn't speak or be listened to about a subject because I'm not the correct gender.
It's really not about whether you're allowed to speak on this subject. No one's telling June, or maybe there are some people saying, shut up and don't talk about this. The idea that has been put forward is, why aren't we listening to men talk about this instead, when men are the ones that know what it's like to be a guy and have the problems that guys have? Why is it that we're listening to women instead of men talk about this? It would be like listening to men talk about being pregnant. Why wouldn't we listen to women talk about pregnancy instead of listening to men talk about that? It really should just be common sense. No one's telling Shoe0nHead that she can't have an opinion or voice her opinion. The question is, why are we listening to her instead of men? Why are we listening to other women talk about this instead of paying attention to what guys are saying about this? Because guys would clearly be the overall better source of information for reasons that should be obvious. So no, it's not SJW behavior, because it's not saying, oh, shut up, you can't talk about this at all. It's, hey, men are the ones that clearly are going to have more expertise here because they're men, because they experience life as men. So I think that Shoe reacts to this in completely the wrong way, but it is what it is. But no one's telling her, or at least none of these commenters are telling her, shut up, you can't talk about this. It's, hey, why aren't we listening to men talk about this when they'd obviously be the more rational choice to listen to when it comes to men's issues?
Anyone can talk about anything they want. That's free speech, bit. You don't have to listen. You can make your own video talking about the subject, Mr. Man, but you know they're just gonna call you sexist and misogynist, so you might as well just use me as a human shield.
So I actually think this is a really good point that June makes. There is one assumption built into this, though, and that is, it really only matters if you're actually trying to change society. In other words, oh, no one's going to listen to men, so women are the people that can talk about this, even if they may not have, obviously, firsthand experience of what it's like to be a man, because we live in a gynocentric post-feminist society, more or less, that just doesn't care about men's problems. Okay, fair enough, but then if no one cares about men's problems in the first place, where do you really go from there, right? The assumption is that you're trying to change society and that the best strategy is to allow someone like June to speak on men's behalf because no one's going to listen to the men themselves. Okay, but is that strategy really going to work? Does anyone really care about men now because women are saying that we ought to? I don't think we're really moving in that direction. Now, I will say this, though. There is still the point that if the message is being put out there for men to look at this and say, hey, maybe I wouldn't listen to guys talk about stuff because I just see them as competitors. The starting point is you're dealing with a blue-pilled man. And so the blue-pilled man may think that men just whine or these men aren't worth listening to, they're all losers. But then a woman tells you, hey, feminism really has done enough damage to the point that relationships are screwed. The situation between men and women has shifted so far in women's favor that men essentially have very little incentive to do things like get married and have a family because the carpet can be pulled out from under you so easily at almost any time. If the message can get out there better so that more men can receive that message in a way that puts out good information, in a way that's accurate, then I don't have a problem with that. And so I do actually think that this is a good point in her favor, right? She's not lying when she says that no one's going to pay attention to men that say this, and this is a big part of the core problem. But at the same time, that only helps if the message that's being put out there by the female MRAs and anti-feminists is actually accurate. In some cases it is. In the content that Shoe made about men's loneliness and all that, I don't really have too many objections to her specific points. So that's not what I'm really critiquing here. But other content creators are going to just basically tell men what they want to hear, regardless of whether there's any value in that. Other content creators are really not trying to be knowledgeable about this. They're not trying to put good information out there for men. And if that becomes the dominant message, then that's going to be a problem. That's going to corrupt the value or part of the value that the men's community has for men that are in the process of becoming aware of things, that are in the process of figuring out a lot of this stuff.
It's not that she's a woman or cares, she's the kind of person who will only talk about an issue because it's popular. Women suddenly want to help men, but only because it benefits them and their causes.
Well, now not only are conservative women talking about it, but also the left. This is the problem with the women that decide to come forward and speak about men's issues. They don't care about men's issues. You must ask the question. Now that they're coming around and talking about men's issues, is it to help men or to win men into their cause?
The interesting thing about Joker's segment here and how Shoe0nHead basically says, I'm not like the other female anti-feminists that are just picking up on this now that it's popular in the clip that I'm about to show where she talks about that. The thing about it is that the reason why Shoe0nHead was featured in Joker's response video is, one, she blocked Joker for his comment on Twitter. And two, really all that Joker was saying in that comment is that, again, this is just part of the problem. The fact that women can come out and talk about men's issues, but men themselves can't without being ridiculed, is a big part of why we are at where we're at. Society is so gynocentric in that sense that really beyond a certain point, this is my own thought process, right? This isn't what Joker said and this isn't what Shoe0nHead said. But if we're at that point, is there really any hope for getting greater society to care about men's problems when men still can't really talk about these problems themselves? When the idea is, oh, we need to defer to women in order to get our message out there and in order for people to take this seriously. If that's the case, I don't think there's much hope for changing society in terms of making society treat men fairly or having some sort of balance between the genders again. But the issue is that she never addressed what Joker's video was actually about, which is that you're not going to recruit men to a political cause if you actually care about men and their problems as a whole. If you're really focused on helping men, it's not going to be about men and the left, which is partly what Shoe0nHead's video was about, was the left doesn't want to help men. The left doesn't address men's issues, and that's why men are more conservative or on the right. Really, the right is just as bad with the whole suck it up and be a real man type of thing. And so, yes, you have some characters like Andrew Tate and whatnot that are inserting themselves sort of on the right, but for the most part, there's no political solution. There's no remedy that's being offered to men. And if your approach is, well, we just need to incorporate that into our political platform, that's a problem. And I think that's to a large extent what Joker was saying. Shoe0nHead doesn't really address this. She basically conveys that I'm going to block you if you point out that really men are the ones that should be listened to because they're the ones that have firsthand experiences, obviously, with being a guy. So I'm going to block you because you said that, and I'm not really going to address any of the issues that Joker brought up. That's not really a good way to go about this, but it is what it is. This is what June chose to do with her response, so I'm going to let the video continue.
So first of all, let me just clear something up, because some of you seem a bit confused. I started talking about these subjects 10 years ago, way back before it was popular to do so. Back when I was doxxed, harassed, had angry feminists calling my job and trying to get me fired over mocking pop feminism and talking about men's issues. And a lot of these people coming at me now, telling me I'm jumping on a bandwagon, started like 2 or 3 years ago, when it was safe to do so.
And that's all well and good. I get that she's saying that she made anti-feminist content many years ago up until this point, and that's great. I'm going to get into a more in-depth discussion about this before the end of the video, but would she even have been featured in Joker's response if she hadn't blocked him on Twitter? Right? That's the thing about this, is it's not so much a matter of evaluating June and her channel or the sort of message that she's put out over the years. It's a matter of looking at it as a whole. And frankly, there's a touch of solipsism with this, right? June's making it about herself when really the only reason why she was one of the primary people that Joker was talking about is because, again, she blocked him on Twitter and didn't hear him out. And so, I mean, I read Joker's tweet and he did use some profanity, and I don't see how that would affect Shoe0nHead because she uses profanity all the time. But the bottom line is that, again, she doesn't really address anything that Joker said, and she just makes it all about herself. Oh, I was here this many years ago, blah, blah, blah. And I know that. I'm not saying that's not true, although I'm going to get into the caveat of that, of making anti-feminist content for all those years. But the bottom line is, so what? This isn't really about you. This is about what's happening in the men's community as a whole. And what's happening in the men's community as a whole is that you have a voice, and oftentimes good-intentioned men that actually make good quality content don't have a voice. And a lot of that's on purpose, right? A lot of that is to, I think, from the perspective of YouTube and other video platforms, primarily YouTube. I think they're doing that on purpose because they know that if they allow women to speak on men's behalf, that, yeah, you might get more views that way on YouTube in general. But at the same time, that's a way to subvert the message if, again, women kind of put their own spin on things and water things down. That's a way for men to not recognize that maybe some form or fashion of walking away from conventional society could be their best option. Maybe just not giving a fuck is maybe the best conclusion for this situation between men and women today. I think that that's a big part of why Shoe0nHead and other female content creators are so popular now. But a lot of it is also that men watch that type of content. Everybody listens to women and no one cares about what men have to say. So it becomes a chicken or the egg thing of what the source of the problem is. But ultimately, it doesn't matter how many years you specifically have been making content. What matters is how a lot of these women that are just coming into the community have taken over the message more and more, right? What matters is how women can be successful like this. Someone like Pearl Davis can come in and just start making content about men's issues and have however many subs she has now. I think it's over 1 million, where there are no men's content creators that have that much of a following. Joker is probably pretty much the top dog at this point, and I think he has like 400,000 subs. So again, the fact that women can do this is the issue. It's not about you, Shoe0nHead. It's not about your channel. It's not about your history. It's about the overall problem here.
So with all due respect, sir,
stay out of my territory.
But in full seriousness, it is good when more people talk about this subject. I'm glad you talk about this. I'm glad there are people like the honey badgers who have been talking about this stuff for a very long time.
I'm hoping that you can't get a strike from playing a Breaking Bad clip that was part of someone else's video, but you never know. I'm going to leave that in there and just hope for the best. But again, the problem is that it's not really about Shoe0nHead being part of this community, or not really of this community, but making anti-feminist content for entertainment purposes for all these years. And I'm going to get into that further, right? That's one of the conclusions that I'm building to here. But it's the overall dynamic. It's the overall change in what we've been seeing over the past few years within the men's community, which is that women are more and more and more the voices that you hear, while men that produce good content are the ones that are being drowned out. And I'm not saying that my content's that great. For anyone that wants to say, well, your content's not as good as Shoe0nHead's, yes, I realize that. But the problem is that it's not really about her. It's not about the honey badgers. There are honey badgers that I've listened to that I like, and there are some of them that are involved in that I don't like as much. But overall, that's fine. But there is one key difference. The honey badgers actually are MRAs, and Shoe0nHead is making content for the purpose of entertainment and basically clicks. And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that per se, but there is a point to be made on that closer to the end of this video. For now, let's go ahead and move on to the next segment.
This girl is a fake who wants every man to be a castrated beta male feminist commie like her boyfriend probably is. She takes advantage of men like this. Do not listen to her. Lefty women want to help men become good feminists who devote their lives to helping women have all the power so they can make men their servants. Basically, we need to help men destroy men. That's the only way men should be helped. We women said so. Shoe0nHead. Real quote, never trust a woman, even if they are saying the truth. It's so weird how, they need to convince themselves that even when a woman is showing empathy and, caring about this subject, that she's just like a lying snake in the grass.
No, that's not what I get from that at all. I get that at a superficial level, that seems to be an absurd statement, that don't trust women even if they're telling you the truth. But what that really just means is people will tell you the truth if they think that it meets their interests, if they think that it's going to serve their needs. And lots of women will do this, and people in general, right? They'll tell you what you want to hear. Some of it may be true, some of it may not be true, but it's based on their interests being served. It's not really based on anything that's actually positive for you. at least in terms of the overall outcome, the long-range outcome. And so that's all that statement means. I think that should be fairly clear, honestly. I get how it looks funny and looks absurd, but yeah, even if a woman's telling you the truth, it doesn't mean she has good intentions. And to say that, well, this is just about trying to keep women out and it's just about this sort of like desperate behavior. Again, a lot of this comes from understanding or not understanding the history of the men's community, where women in the past have taken over the message, and it seems to a large extent to be happening again in a different way on a different platform, but in a way that essentially is similar. It's women are now the leading figures in this, men's voices are being drowned out, and the men that have made content for many years are not getting as many views compared to these women that may or may not have a very good take on the message because they don't have the same experiences and they have their interests in mind. And again, that's where this type of statement comes from. Even if a woman's telling you the truth, doesn't mean that she has good intentions, because oftentimes people don't have good intentions, especially toward men these days.
Literally just a mirror universe of these fucking femcells. It's mommy and daddy issues all the way down. Ladies, be a good mom to your sons. Fellas, be a good dad to your daughters. Try to prevent creating the most insufferable, annoying people on earth, please. I don't know if it's because I grew up with a good relationship with both of my parents or what, but this gender war shit is just so toxic, man.
Yeah, but we are in a gender war. And it is toxic, but at the same time, that doesn't change the fact that we are pretty much in a gender war. Men and women have been pitted against each other by the political and cultural and social forces that be. And you can argue about the exact sort of parameters about this, but my take on it is that the pendulum has swung so far in women's favor that men frankly have very little reason to even want to be a part of conventional relationships or the general societal expectations placed upon them. Men have very little reason to conform to that unless it basically makes them money or helps them meet their own personal goals. And the family court dynamic and accusations that cause you to lose your job and all that clearly is not conducive with those types of things, with making money or meeting your own personal goals, right? So again, it's not like the femcells. It's not like women basically hating on men because they think that they're victims of the patriarchy and that men have done bad things to women throughout all of history, and that is the essential dynamic of history between the genders. It's about taking a rational approach and looking at things and saying, at least for a lot of men within the men's community, saying that, you know what, all these things are against us. The pendulum has swung so far in women's favor when it's reproductive rights, gender expectations, the family courts. I'm not going to get into any of those things too much because it'll make this video way too long. But you just look at things for how they are and it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to avoid most women. I'm just not going to care about what women think anymore or what society expects me to do because that doesn't help me. And so, yeah, some men are going to end up being lonely. And a lot of men don't reach that point where they can admit that, you know what, everything that we've been taught from the time that we were little boys about how we relate to women has pretty much been false. This idea that women are sugar and spice and everything nice, and women are strong and independent and don't need us, but we still need to prove ourselves to them, and they're victims of the patriarchy, but then somehow we need to make up for that by helping them, but they don't need us all at the same time. Men are starting to look at that and say, you know what, this is all a bunch of horse shit. But even the men that can't get to the point where they realize that, they're suffering a great deal. In fact, when men do accept that that's where things stand, that's when a lot of the healing process can begin. That's when they can restructure their lives in a way that may be healthier or more beneficial for them, especially in the long run. So no, it's not just the femcel equivalent to the feminists. It's not a matter of men just hating women. You do have some of that within the men's community. I'm not going to say that that's not there, but a lot of it is just walking away from a scam at this point, really. But again, saying that the gender war is toxic doesn't change the fact that we're essentially in a gender war. And I've talked about this, and I'm not going to go on much more about it, but, you know, women are not willing to compromise. Women are not willing to be reasonable, even though the pendulum has swung so far in their favor. They think they deserve more, and that just pushes men into the situation that so many men are in. That pushes men into the situation where they either find some way to carve their own path out in life, or they're really lonely and they're struggling, or somewhere in between. But as long as the situation continues the way that it is, there basically is a gender war between men and women, and calling it toxic isn't going to change that. Of course it's toxic, but that's where things stand.
Men and women need each other. You know, we're yin and yang, and the yin and yang is being torn apart by miserable people. Miserable people who want to make you miserable as well.
Yeah, that yin and yang was torn apart many decades ago now, and we're just seeing the consequences of that. There is no yin and yang between men and women anymore. It's obvious with how many people get divorced. It's obvious with all the accusations of violence and sexual abuse. It's pretty clear that regardless of who you want to blame for it for the purposes of this response, it's obvious that the social contract between men and women has been destroyed. So that yin and yang, which you could claim has existed in the past, it hasn't existed for quite some time, and it's just something that is never going to come back, most likely, in this society, at least in my opinion. Right? I don't see how the yin and yang, the social contract between men and women, can ever be reestablished in any way that's not just, we need to exploit men. That seems to be the message on both sides politically, and since that's what the initial topic for June's video was, in terms of why the left has no success at getting men on board, particularly men that don't fall into an ethnic minority, those men are going to vote not left because the left doesn't care about them, but neither does the right. The problem is that both sides don't really care, and the dynamic between men and women can't possibly exist in this arrangement, at least in any sort of healthy way. Women have too much control. They have too much power over the family dynamic, over the workplace, over even things like domestic violence accusations. There's no power bounce anymore. It's just all women need more and men good luck, when then we wonder why the men are struggling. And so regardless of which side you're on politically, it doesn't really help, right? You're not going to get the yin and yang back together. That's been destroyed over a long period of time, and it's only now that the chickens are really coming home to roost, so to speak. So to say that we need to restore that, that's just not going to happen in all likelihood.
One of the most valid criticisms I got about this video was that I didn't offer any solutions. And honestly, that's because I don't have any. I wanted to talk about the problem, but I don't know how to solve it.
I do. The solution's actually pretty simple. It's just that you have to move to the individual level of analysis. Don't get married. Don't have children. Don't live with a woman. That is the solution for the self-aware man when it comes to these issues. And by self-aware, I just mean cognizant of where things really stand between men and women and where things really stand for men in society, right? The solution is to let society go fuck itself when it comes to this. Why should you try to help reform a society or fix a society that has established that it doesn't really care about you or your interests if you're a guy? That's really what this boils down to. Now, there is technically a solution to this at the societal level as well, but that solution is never going to be achieved realistically. What does that involve? First and foremost, you've got to get rid of no-fault divorce, because no-fault divorce is essentially a euphemism for man's fault divorce. That's really what it actually is in terms of its usual effect. You've got to get rid of the Duluth model for domestic violence and actually have an evidence-based approach. You've got to get rid of and reverse Me Too, at least in terms of how it affects anyone except the most wealthy and truly powerful men. You've got to be able to go back to a criminal investigative type of way of doing things, a due process way of doing things, or if it's a matter of a job or whatever, for the sake of argument, if there's evidence that you attacked a female coworker because it's on camera, okay, then you deserve to be fired. but there needs to be some actual evidence or a lot of corroboration of some degree. It can't just be, oh, this woman said that you did something bad and you're fired. These are the things that you have to undo. These are the things that you have to reform. And if that's not going to happen, then the only solution is for the individual man to walk away from this as much as he possibly can by not getting married, not having kids and subjecting himself to the family courts, and not living with a woman and subjecting himself to the domestic violence laws, where it's basically her house because she can call the police and just say that you beat her, and probably you're going to get kicked out if she does that. With or without any sort of evidence at all. There's no reason for men to put themselves in that situation, and the solution is for men to not put themselves in that situation and let society just do what it wants to do until it unravels. That's not necessarily an ideal or optimal solution in any way, but that is the realistic solution here.
A lot of YouTubers and streamers and talking heads will get up on their platform and like pretend they know the answers to everything. But the truth is, I don't. I just think that it's a step in the right direction to be like, hey men, you're struggling, but you're not a bad person. You matter. And if I could snap my fingers and cure this, I absolutely would. But at the end of the day, men are men, and man problems require man solutions. And that solution, of course, is giving me money.
I know she's just joking pretty much when she says that, right? I know she's being facetious. But at the same time, that is kind of all that her video accomplished, is it made her some money. And I have no problem with that. I really don't. I don't really have a problem with Shoe0nHead. If anything, I actually lean kind of toward liking her, but I'm going to get into the overall conclusion on that here. And there's some other points that I want to make. That's the end of the segment that I'm going to play on her, and I'm just going to get to my conclusions and the points that I think are really important to pay attention to that I haven't necessarily seen anyone else in the men's community say.